Hey guys, today's interview is going to be on the topic of communicating with parents. And I think this is probably the first one that you'll watch. So I'll do a little explaining here before I start talking to Melissa and letting her talk. I have just asked several parents that I know who have used childcare if they would be willing to share their experiences with us as a class, because I feel like it's important for us to hear real parent voices and not just read like what the textbook is telling us is important with communication. So we're going to have a series of interviews that we'll be using in the class on different topics connected to our coursework, but giving you the parent's voice. So this first one, this is Melissa Luebbe, and she has some great kids. Melissa's son was in my preschool class, and I miss him to death. um, so Melissa, you agreed to share your experiences or your thoughts with the students in this class about communication efforts with people that have sort of shared in the caring of your kids. Yeah. So, and if it's good, if it's sort of not so good, it will all be beneficial, I think, for the students. So, so I'm just going to open up and let you start talking about your thoughts, and then if I have questions as we go along, I'll sort of bump in.
Okay. Let's see. My experiences with communication. In Gus's first preschool class, that was not with Heather. It was at a different child care center that my older son had gone to, and he had had a great experience there. And so I had just assumed that Gus would also have a great experience there. And that was my first mistake, because every kid is so different. But, in some cases, maybe a whole family of kids go through the same place and it's fine. But the communication I got from Gus's first preschool teachers would be right after I picked him up, and they would tell me Gus had a really hard time being compliant today.
Is that the word they used?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was in timeout repeatedly, and he needs to work on his obedience and things like that. And like, I'm standing there in front of like all these other parents at this church preschool pickup, and like trying not to burst into tears because they're giving me this feedback about my child, like that he's bad or something. And that's what that's how I perceive it, and that's how it feels, because they're hurried and rushed and they're trying to like get the next kid out the door, and I understand that. But it just felt horrible. And when I would ask Gus about it, he was 3, and he would say, I don't like circle time or whatever. And then we kept, he'd go back another day, and the teacher said, well, he's starting to put himself in timeout now. And that is not acceptable, because
Oh my gosh.
because we tell children when they go to timeout, and he doesn't get to just choose when he goes to the timeout chair. And I said, well, if you're going to be sending him there anyway, like, what's wrong? Like, he's choosing to self-regulate by, he's like, I really don't want to do whatever this thing is that you're asking me to do. And I'm like, I know my other option is the timeout chair. So that's what he did in his little 3-year-old mind. And body.
Probably thought that was the right thing to do. Like,
Yeah, because
these are
he
the
thought,
choices I've been presented, so I'll
like,
take this one.
he's like, this is what I do. And then he would start this went on for, he was only there a month, but like in the few weeks he was there, he would, after school, he would say things like, Mommy, I don't want to be a bad kid. And I'm like, you're not a bad kid, you're a great kid. And he goes, I know, I just make bad choices. And like, he was 3 and already feeling terrible. And I would leave every pickup feeling absolutely destroyed. And so that was bad. And
Uh-huh.
so at the end of that was not good. And so at the end of September, we decided to take a break from preschool. And I was under the impression that this was it, and there would be no, like, it just, preschool wasn't going to be a good fit for my child, and we needed to work on some things. And anyway, I just thought it would be better mentally for all of us if
Uh-huh.
he wasn't there anymore. So anyway, in the fall, I came across Heather's preschool class, and we got to meet her and see the classroom. And uh, I was very impressed. I know this isn't an advertisement for PLP, but uh, I was very impressed by how calm and just almost, I don't know, like almost unusually calm and down to earth that she and Anne, the director, were. And Gus was just exploring the room and all that. And I think, Heather, you told me one of the first times I met you, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your child. I'm not afraid of little boys. And honestly, I think that kind of cracked something open for me, that I think that sometimes the way little boys or some kids behave or learn
Uh-huh.
is like unacceptable or really inconvenient for teachers. And
Uh-huh.
I understand that, because it can be inconvenient for the for a parent.
Right.
But we don't get to say you are unacceptable. We
And
don't do
so,
that.
yeah, that for in your initial experience with the first preschool, were there positive interactions, communications with them? Did they ever like talk about when they were talking about behavior with you? Did they ever say, "Here's what we're doing here," or was it like all?
Really, I think that before they'd really had a chance to get to know like all the kind of like more of the facets of my child, of Gus, I think that there was just a level of irritation that was probably like, that was the first impression, and that it was like, oh my, okay. They were nice. They're nice people. They would say things like, well, we're praying that things get better, and
Uh-huh.
we love him. We'll find a way to make it work, and practice sitting on his mat at home for 10 minutes at a time. And like, he can barely do that now. And like, for kindergarten preparation, his little kindergarten countdown he's doing, the practice teachers are like, look, you just did this lesson for 10 minutes, like, how incredible. And like, that seems like a reasonable
Yeah.
expectation for a 5-year old,
Yeah.
maybe, but
Yeah.
like a 3-year old. Anyway, so no, I don't, they weren't mean.
Hmm.
I'm also really sensitive, but I think uh my vibe was, this this isn't a good fit, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So, and they were sad when we left the school, because I was on the parent board there and I was really involved. So they lost that. Um, and there's no parent board at Miss Heather's school. So
So you don't get to do that.
yeah, so I wasn't, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. It was about my child. And that was a different experience. So uh, I went from feeling like my child was unacceptable at this place, or was a problem, to feeling like, okay, let's give this a try. And I think um, like the communication style was very different at Gus's new preschool, because his teacher was Heather, and and I happened to get a lot of by proxy education about what her philosophies of childcare and early childhood teaching art, and that it was for me to understand like that young children deserve as much respect and dignity as like any other human being. And I don't know why that wasn't the first thing in my mind before. And that like the early childhood education and childcare isn't just a preparation for like grade school or what's next. Like these years are actually important, and like what the kids are doing in this time is very important. And it just is. Anyway, I was able to like have a greater feeling of peace about that. And also, there was communication. There wasn't communication every day of like every little thing my kid did. Like he was loud or this or that. If there was something egregious, Heather told me, or we talked about it, but it was never like a personal indictment on my parenting or a personal indictment on my child's like soul, or like that they are bad, that he was bad. And guys, I know Heather doesn't believe that. And I think that communication piece, the connection, like I don't know what you did or how you did it, but it's like this, I can't speak highly enough of establishing a connection with parents, and like getting to know their child a little bit, so that when you do have bad days or hard days, you know, you're not like, I can't deal with this kid, like I like this is terrible. Like because we learn, because I'm a student of life, and we learn that children are often seeking connection or seeking relationship. Like when people say, oh, that's just attention seeking behavior. Well, Heather and the research might say that's seeking relationship, you know, like there's a connection that needs to be made. And I think that's been kind of revolutionary for me. It was revolutionary for me in my experience with Gus in preschool.
So I'm fighting the urge to just start sharing Gus anecdotes.
Please do.
That'll be a different interview for it. But
Okay.
but I want to go back to what you, because more than once in this you just describing your experience, you've said they were nice teachers. They were very nice. And so I think it's important to realize that these kinds of conversations that are sometimes painful for the parent, the teacher has good intentions. This is what the field is taught. When there is negative behavior, you should always share it with the parent, and the parent then should, do something to help. And usually what it looks like is I tattle at the end of the day to you about your child, and then I want you to go home and like take care of it there, instead of being like a real partnership where we would say, here's what I am doing to help. Just want you to know this is going on. We're doing this together. So I just think it's really important that no one is saying these teachers are mean or trying to hurt your feelings.
Right.
This is the culture of early childhood. We're trained that this is the way we're supposed to do it, but I want them to hear, what you've shared, that is not always productive for connecting with a parent, or helpful for the parent to know what they're expected to do next, or just, and if it's always the hard stuff, parents are going to stop wanting to talk to you at the end of the day. That's when they're going to come in, grab their coat, and get out the door.
Right. I mean, I think the relationship, like the experience and the relationship would just start to naturally degrade, and to the point where everyone's just trying to get through the day. And like, that's kind of a terrible way to live, especially if you're a child.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, like we don't have to be there. Like we're paying tuition to be at preschool or childcare, and we want it to be a good experience. We want everyone to grow, and but also it be like a good working environment for the teachers and the school staff. But I don't, I, I think you've told me, Heather, things like when a child feels like they're bad at school, like I'm bad at this,
Mm-hmm.
like it becomes a narrative that they will continue to create for themselves. And I don't think, I don't think I understood like how, like how much and how aware children are. I should have already known this, but like I think it's like okay, this is like kind of a tangent, but Magda Gerber,
Ooh,
like
love Magda Gerber.
like I think when like when my boys were babies, I read something about like establishing respect and communication from birth. Like when you're changing their diaper, like you explain what you're doing. You say, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I'm gonna change your diaper right now."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and look at what your body's done. Like that's amazing. And or what? Like I don't know if you say anything, but you're like this is I'm going to gently touch your body and I'm going to get you all clean and fresh.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, and not just like plonking them down on the changing table, like ripping the diaper off, you know, because it's gross. Or like being like, ooh, that's so nasty. Or so, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like, I mean, like giving their little bodies and minds dignity and respect from the
Mm-hmm.
start. Like, I mean, it seems like such an obvious concept, but
Mm-hmm.
I also think sometimes, well, I have thoughts about this, but that like our society doesn't necessarily value children, or
No.
they like the idea of children in a certain way, but not like their actual right to take up space and
Right.
have a voice and opinions and beliefs and everything else. So I don't know. I feel really grateful that um, I mean, Gus's preschool experience was definitely cut off at the knees because of the
COVID, yeah.
pandemic, but
The
that his,
Rona-virus.
yeah, Corona,
Coronavirus.
and that his, that the experience that he did have was very positive in the, especially because of the communication. And it's not that you didn't ever have to have hard conversations with me, Heather, or
Yeah.
that you didn't have to tell me things I didn't want to hear, or that I was like, oh, of course. Um,
I
but
just, I just remember that day and he was like, I just don't want to be at school. And I was like, well, neither do I, but here we are.
and yet here we are. And
And
he
then
said, I just don't want to be here. And
when you got there, I was like, well, we struggled, but we struggled together
we,
today.
and like that humanizing, and that you told me that, I was like, I didn't have any feeling like, oh, my child should have a good day every day. Like have a day, like
Right.
have a day.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
don't know.
that whole respect storyline that you just went down, your little tangent about
My
respect
tangent.
actually is really relevant to this
Oh,
idea about communication, because so often those end of the day pickup conversations happen with the child right there.
yeah,
And we forget that that's a human being listening to himself, herself being talked about negatively by two really important people in their lives, and that has a cumulative effect
yeah,
if that's happening a lot. So we just need to really be intentional about those conversations, and pickup time is an easy time to have those conversations. I'm not sure it's the most effective time to
right,
have those kinds of conversations.
right. I feel like it would be more appropriate to like, and I know I'm not saying like people's time isn't like extremely limited and valuable, but I mean the pickup conversation, it's like it has the potential to be so incredibly stressful and make an already like, you know, transition, like, you know, transitions can be
Mhm.
like tricky even for
Yeah.
kids who are super docile and compliant.
Right. The
Um,
ones that it comes easy for to be.
otherwise, you know, it's like a quick email or a text or a phone call, like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, this is kind of what our day was like. And because you know, this sounds so foolish, but like everything we say in front of our kids, in front of the kids you teach, like they hear it and they're
Right.
absorbing it. It doesn't just like roll off. Like it
Mm-hmm.
is all, it all has impact. Like
Right.
they, Gus is still talking about a kid that was in PLP that I've never met, that I don't know anything about. And he keeps saying, I hope that this kid is not in my kindergarten class. He was not nice. He was
No.
mean to my friends too. And I'm like, whoever that kid is made an impact.
Right. That is a memory.
So
That's funny.
whatever we say obviously has an impact. Um, and I think like, sure, parents picking up their kids or having their trusting their kids to a child care provider, an educator, you know, we want to know. Like, I'm a person, like I want all the information. When
Mm-hmm.
people complain about, you know, not enough or too many emails from the school, I'm like, give me more. I want more. Like, I would like a full like docket of information about my child and what their day is like. I just want to
Uh-huh.
see it.
Yeah.
Because I have, there goes my codependency. And and but anyways, I want to know. I want to know how it's going, but
Yeah.
not in a tattling way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I need to wrap up, but I'm going to ask every parent that's doing these interviews as a last question, just what is something that you wish the people caring for your child knew about him? Or if you were to take him somewhere new today, what what comes to mind when just like if you could just understand this one thing about my kid?
Um, if you could just understand that Gus really, whatever he is telling you about in stream of conscience monologue, like he really, really wants you to know that, whether it's about great white sharks or frogs that poop out beetles or whatever, like he has like a deep need for you to know that. He feels like it's very important for him
Mhm.
to share that information. So
Sure.
I that's what I want grown-ups to know, like what kids have to tell you is important, and you can pretend to be interested or actually be interested.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And just that act of listening to that story, knowing that he has that deep need, and you have now spent time listening will go so far
It goes
in
so
building a relationship. And he has good stories.
yes, some of them are
Good
tall tales and some of them are facts.
good information. Well, then we just use our critical thinking and we get there. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Melissa. That was great. And I think we're going to have some great discussion, the
Oh,
students
good.
and I now, based on what you just shared. So I really do appreciate your time.
My
And
pleasure.
tell Gus hello for me.
I will.
And and uh, so you've
Bye,
listened to the
everybody.
podcast. You know I can't do smooth exits. Okay,
No,
so let's just stop recording.
bye.
Okay.